Hey everyone, it's Terrence Branley with the Grow IT Podcast. Welcome back, and we're looking forward to a conversation today with Patrick Kinne, who is the VP of Client Service. But I suspect that Patrick wears a lot more hats than just that's under that title, and he is that Vice President of Client Service at 27 Global. And grateful to have him on today.
Yeah, thanks, Terrence. I'm excited to be here and have the conversation.
Great. Well, so tell me a little bit about your background up until and including obviously 27 Global.
Yeah, for sure. When I came out of my undergrad at the University of Kansas, I went and got a job in healthcare IT, specifically implementations of lab software. The company I was at had a bunch of different products, and I was on the pathology side. I was doing upgrades, installs, customizations for hospitals all across the U.S. So I was traveling a fair bit, coast to coast, meeting with clients, and helping make sure the software met their needs, and teaching them how to use it, managing them through upgrades, major versions, minor versions, and a lot of it was on site because there's hardware integrations and also voice recognition integrations. Most often we used tools like Dragon or VoiceBrook. And at the time, it was a huge time saver for the pathologists who are reviewing the specimens after they come through the lab and get tested, and they're reviewing the results. So they could dictate the results to the report, save a ton of time instead of typing the same thing over and over. Um, the company I was at, they were facing some headwinds, particularly from Epic, which is out of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Epic has a huge EMR, a lot of market share. They had built some competing products to what the company I was working at had, and the business model was to give those products away if a customer bought the EMR. So our market share was steadily shrinking.
They,
Um,
they,
so at
they
the
took like the Microsoft approach, and there's a lot of larger platforms that do the same, right? They kind of bundle it in with their existing to kind of take out competitors and off and
yeah,
running.
Yeah, so it was a great job. It allowed me to move to Denver, which was great for my personal goals, which was to snowboard as much as possible. So,
You know, I love that.
yeah, so that was great. And they had tuition reimbursement. So, pretty much immediately, I went back to school through the University of Colorado's downtown campus and got an MBA with a concentration in information systems.
Oh, great.
Um, I had been actively looking for a new job because I saw the headwinds that they were facing seemed pretty tough to get around those. Um, and I had been exploring some contract gigs for that software where the pay was a lot higher. There's a lot more travel, no benefits, but the pay was fantastic. So I've been interviewing for those when I got connected with 27 Global. And I immediately knew that was someplace I wanted to work. At the time, a pretty small company with an office in Kansas City and one guy out in Denver. And they had just signed up a healthcare IT client that they're still in the hospital, but they had a much different project. And it was an electronic whiteboard that was in all the patient rooms. It was integrated with the EMR and some ancillary systems. It would show things like the television, movies, educational content, the patient schedule, any learning they had been assigned, and had ways to call the nurse and sort of navigate through their hospital stay. Uh, the client that they had in Denver was a Craig Hospital, which is a fantastic place, really specializes in traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury rehab. So you'd have guys who were 50 feet up in the air on a dirt bike, come down, break their neck, and paralyzed. Sometimes just the legs, sometimes fully paraplegic. So they would go to Craig to really learn how to adjust to their new life. And it's still a very special place, and I really stay in touch with a lot of people there. Um, they had some specific needs at this hospital that we built onto the system that I love talking about.
Yeah.
If you're a paraplegic, you can't really use a television remote. So we integrated adaptive technology hardware with our system. It was running off a custom Linux box that was underneath the television. So it had a USB port. So we were able to integrate with just about any adaptive tech that they had. One of the most popular ones for paraplegics is called a sip and puff device. So it's a tube that basically sits on your chair or off your bed right by your mouth. And it can take in at least two kinds of input. So you're either blowing or you're sucking on the device. So we were able to take those two forms of input.
Is that kind of like
And
an on-off type of switch, or like the mechanism, right?
yeah, it's like A or B. Like
Got it.
imagine you
Okay.
have like
Got
just
it.
two buttons.
Got it.
So we built a scrolling system through the menu. So basically, if you hit your sip and puff, it opens up the menu and it would start scrolling. You could adjust the scrolling speed depending on the person's like capacity to react to that. So you could get through the whole menu. You could select what you wanted to see. You could start a movie, pause it, change the volume, all this stuff. And then they had a Crestron system in the hospital that had blinds in the room, so like a sunshade and a blackout shade. They had dimmable lights, and they had temperature in each of the rooms. So we built an integration between our system and Crestron, so you could start lowering the blinds, stop them wherever you wanted, adjust the temperature, and also dim the lights. So for someone who's a paraplegic, you wake up, the lights are super bright, maybe you want to dim them. Having the autonomy to do that was huge for their patient population. So I got a lot of, personal gratification from building that product.
How long did that take you guys? Like, I that's pretty fascinating, right? Because how long ago was that?
That's right when I started, so 2015 into 2016.
Okay, so maybe that's not as mind blowing today in terms of like IoT and connecting a lot of things, but back then that probably was. That was probably pretty way outside of the box even back then.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the big advantages we had is it was all local. Like the system was deployed on-prem. In hospitals, there's a lot of privacy concerns. So Craig would see these demos from these voice control systems, but there was always this issue with the data going out of the hospital and coming back, which I think that might be better handled today because there are healthcare specific cloud environments you can build that handle all the privacy and things like that. But at the time, the system being basically fully local, though it was still connected to the internet for some functionality, was a big thing for them. So, in terms of building that, I think it took us about 3 months to build the adaptive tech stuff. Just to make the functionality of the application, navigate all the pages, go backwards, forwards, make sure all the video controls work. And then the Crestron integration, I think about another 3 months. And a lot of that, like the actual integration itself wasn't that difficult. It was more so the testing of all the different adaptive tech devices. Some rooms would have different Crestron hardware on the back end, so there were some modifications we had to make to how we were integrated with them. But once we rolled it out, it was pretty bulletproof.
So it's interesting. So I mean, this is one of those things where and we'll probably get to it in a few minutes in terms of asking for client success stories. But since we're there, let's just carry on through it. And my question is when you guys started working with them, was that something they were trying to accomplish, or did they even think that was even possible? Like, what was at the time? What was their pain point, or what was their kind of desired outcome that had you guys come up with that?
So I was really lucky to work with a guy there, the CIO, who just retired, I think, end of last year or maybe early this year. His name was Chris Watkins, and he was really good about listening to what the occupational therapists and the adaptive tech lab and the patients themselves wanted. So the requirements really came from him. And that's what I love about a client is if they can, really describe what they want, we can build it. A lot of times if the requirements are pretty loose or undefined,
Vague,
yeah, it'll take more time for us. One of the key things we do here with our consultants is really dig in and understand the client needs. But that can add duration to the project if we have to go in and really scope out the whole thing. Chris was fantastic about telling us exactly what he wanted, which made our cycle time a lot shorter.
Cool. So tell me, okay, so what, like, let's talk about that in terms of the patient outcomes, or like, what was the, after you guys had implement that for them, what was the feedback that you got from them?
Very positive. The IT staff at Craig is really good. They go into the patient rooms a lot. Not you don't always want to see an IT guy in your room. You're like, oh, what's going on here? And they'll just get me on the Wi-Fi. But it was such an enabling feature or package of features for the patients that the feedback was really good. And they really appreciated the autonomy, because in the past, before we had the environmental controls integration, if it's too cold in your room, you had to call a nurse and like, hey, can you walk over and adjust the temperature for me? Like, that's not a very empowering thing to do for a
No, and
patient.
especially when
So,
you're talking about folks that have, incurred TBIs and traumatic injuries that have rendered them all of a sudden overnight without their independence. That's
mhm,
huge, right? To be able to give them those, what may seem like little things to us in terms of convenience, right? Those would be conveniences to you and I, but to folks like that who have just overnight lost their complete enablement and
mhm,
independence, that ability to have that control, at least over their environment, is probably huge. And I imagine that the patient outcomes in terms of, what their I don't want to say happiness, but I mean their ability to be like, thank you, right? Like, I mean,
mhm.
it's. I'm sure that translated, for them as a facility.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it went hand in hand with a lot of the other things they do there. They have an amazing gym called the Peak Center. So imagine, like a small little Lifetime Fitness, but all the equipment is designed around, if you're in a wheelchair or if you're paraplegic, you can still do some exercises. So they also had an adaptive driving simulator, because they wanted a lot of these patients, because the stays are very long there. They like the person only leaves when they feel ready. But they want to teach them everything from taking care of themselves to staying fit to how to drive. So to go back to their room and not have to call a nurse for the rest of the day after they've been working on all that stuff, it was huge for them.
Yeah. Well, so tell us about what would you consider to be at 27 Global? What would you consider to be, kind of the core offering? Like, what are you guys really good at? Obviously, we, have that, example of a great, client outcome there, and I'm sure you have other success stories we'll talk about later. But what do you consider? If people ask you, hey, what do you guys do well, Patrick? How do you respond to that?
Yeah. So the core of the business, ever since we were founded in 2008, has been custom software development. Um, so the founder came from big consulting, Arthur Anderson, and then Accenture. I
Mhm.
mean, he knew what it took to build enterprise grade software. You really don't want just one guy coding away on his own. So we bring a full team approach to that. Every one of our software development projects is led by a team of consultants, architects, cloud engineers, sometimes a data engineer, and then a scaled team offshore. So we bring a lot of local expertise, process, rigor to every project. We manage the project very tightly on a weekly basis. We run a status report that has overall status, scope, schedule, budget. We use the stoplights from Boeing and Ford. Alan Mulally, one of my favorite executives to read about. He's one of the champions of that approach.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a really high touch with our clients throughout the whole project lifecycle. And we end up keeping clients for a very long time. Most of our clients are multi-year. We almost say lifetime clients, like as long as our stakeholder is there, we're working with that client. And I think a key part to our approach is staying ahead of new processes and technology. When I started, we were still doing, almost waterfall development, where we'd write up a huge software spec, SSRS software requirements document, and scope it out and then build it. As Agile came on the board, we were quick to adopt that. Right now, every consultant has a professional Scrum Master certification, and if I bring on someone new and they don't have that, it's one of their 90-day goals to get that. Because today, when you build software, someone might come to you with an idea and it's pretty well fleshed out. They have spreadsheets, they may even have mock-ups. But as we're building it and releasing it every 2 weeks, they're going to get feedback and want to change things. But we don't want the budget to go crazy on them. So we manage that on a weekly basis, even though we're releasing every 2 weeks, to make sure we're always having the highest value feature at the top. That way, when we get to the end of our client's budget for that project, they're really happy with what they have, even if it's not all the way initially what they thought it was going to be. We want to be able to adapt and deliver that for them.
When we talked about your client, in healthcare, is that a specific industry you guys focus on? Do you have clients that you have in multiple industries? I mean, where you guys have the most success with in terms of the types of clients you work with?
Yeah, so we're industry agnostic. We do have a couple healthcare success stories. I wouldn't say it's the biggest part of our business right now. That's changed over the years. At one point, transportation, a big trucking company that did truckload, LTL, small parcel, expedited air freight, actually, was taking up they were about half of our revenue for a time. But over the past 5 to 7 years, our biggest concentration has been in financial services, then insurance, and then energy, and then engineering and construction.
Okay.
Which I see growing here. We've hired a lot of people with engineering backgrounds, not just the software side, but the hardware side as well. So I definitely see energy and engineering and construction growing. But we have a ton of success stories in financial services and insurance. A lot of numbers, a lot of math going on in those industries, a lot of very old applications that run the back end of these businesses.
I was going to ask you, give me a few of those examples. I mean, like I said, people love success stories because I think it helps them understand, especially in certain industries, right? Healthcare, fintech, insurance, manufacturing. And so, and talk about those, because I think it helps a lot of folks out there that are listening, that if they're in one of those industries, they're like, oh, if they can do that for us, they can probably help, or they can do that for them, they can probably help us. But give us a couple of success stories, please.
Sure. So we had a client that built a 401k fund manager. So this took what used to be a lot of paper or PDF review and put it into one tool. So if you're a 401k administrator, you could better see the funds available, their performance, and provide better options more quickly to your clients, the consumers of the 401k. That was a long time project that ended in an acquisition for our client. So we helped facilitate the acquisition and integration into the acquiring company. We built a couple different retirement planning or financial planning tools for clients. One was a startup that's doing well today, and another is a large wealth manager who was growing by acquisition. So the first tool we built for them was a replacement for some software they used to license. So as they were growing by acquisition, the license cost for this software was just getting crazy. And it wasn't perfect for them. It was tough to get customizations built by the vendor. So they came to us and said, hey, could we build our own retirement planning tool, which once we build it, there's no license cost. We can deploy it to all of our advisors. It can work online and offline. If they're visiting a client who may live out in a rural area, they can do all the planning there and then sync it up. And then they have total control over what that tool looks like, how it works, how the reports are generated based on what they were hearing from their clients. So that was a huge success.
Yeah, that's not easy, right? To get off. I mean, it's easy for us to just flippantly talk about getting off an enterprise level software, building your own, but that is no easy task.
Yeah, so we are. Once that project was a success, that really got us in with that client, and we went on to build several different tools for them. We still have a bunch of active projects with them, but some of the tools we built were to expedite the speed of their acquisitions. They're buying firms all over the country. When you're onboarding those advisors and clients, it was a very manual process. So we built tools to help process the paperwork, help get them onboarded to our client. So it's all a seamless experience. So that's really helped them grow more quickly and effectively. And I love talking about them. I can't name them, but they've been in the Wall Street Journal. And one of the things they talk about is the investment in the tools that they've built has really been a foundation for their success there.
That's a big kudos, even though you can't mention that. You're probably
Yeah.
proud to read that and be like, "That's us." But
Yeah. My mom actually read it before I did and said it to me. It was like, hey, I think this is you guys. I was like, yeah.
So that's fintech. What about, and that probably actually they did more on the insurance side, but what about in manufacturing? And I think you mentioned transportation as well.
Yeah, so for transportation, had a couple different clients, each with unique needs. One was a smaller trucking company that needed to recruit drivers. Now, this is a couple years ago. The trucking industry is having some downturns now, but they were struggling to recruit drivers, so they built an internal tool that would take in a list of phone numbers of truck drivers and text them and say, hey, are you interested in coming on to work for us? Here's what we can pay you. Here's the benefits. Here's the route types. And it was pretty much all automated. So you could identify a lead, put them in a cadence, which was a set of text messages on a different time scale. And if they responded to one of those, it would put them in a queue for a real person to answer it. So it was working all right when we came on. So we came on and really stabilized the platform, reduced some costs, made sure it was performant. And then they started getting interest from other trucking companies that had the same need. Truck drivers at the time were in very high demand and changing jobs all the time. So if you're a trucking company and you've got a fleet of trucks and a couple of those are sitting empty, that's lost revenue to you every single day. So it's really important to have a driver in the seat of all those trucks. So we transformed that application from an internal tool to a multi-tenant SaaS application where they could go out and actually sell it to other trucking companies to use the same tool they had built to solve the internal problem. So that was.
Do you see that often? And again, what attracted me, obviously being the marketing guy, and I loved lead gen stuff, and we had that happen to us years ago in my first agency, and we were developing an internal tool to kind of automate the lead gen process of delivering to an end client, and we got to the point where we're showing a couple other of our peers in the industry, and they're like, hey, can we license that from you? And I was like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that, right? But I wonder, being in the software development side and having clients, developing special applications like that, do you see that happen?
Yeah, pretty frequently, and it's across all different industries. We had a client that specialized in analyst relations. So these are people who work for Gartner or other analyst groups, tracking what conferences they're going to be at. So if you're a brand and you want to talk to an analyst to make sure they understand what it is you do and what makes you different, you could stay in touch with those people, read publications they had written, and then get in touch with them. So they sort of did that for their own analyst relations business and then transformed that to a SaaS application they could license. I have another client in the energy space where the core problem they were facing is back when solar was taking off is their customers, they were a utility. Their customers were getting sold solar systems, and the sales guy would tell them, hey, your bill is going to be zero once you install this solar system. Then they get their bill after the install, and it wasn't zero, and they call the utility to complain. So the CEO there, his name's Bill Hetherington, engineer, like super smart guy, said, in order to make sure I'm giving my customers the best experience, I need to build something that shows them, here's how much energy you generated, here's how much energy you used, here's how much came from the grid. So they had built this thing originally with a Raspberry Pi. And
I think I remember reading something about this. Continue. I remember reading this.
Yeah. So they built this 6 or 7 years ago. And then we're able to show their customers, hey, here's why your bill is what it is. It's because your solar generated this much, but you used this much. Therefore, you had to pull this from the grid. So that worked for the utility. They went through a couple of different iterations of this, trying to figure out what other features can we add to it to make it more valuable to our residential and utility customers. And it was really all for internal use for that utility. But then as they got more advanced, they started using custom white labeled hardware that monitors every circuit in the home. So imagine your breaker panel. Each one of those breakers is now monitored, so you see exactly how much your HVAC is using, exactly how much your pool pump is using, exactly how much your solar is using. And then we can aggregate that up across the whole utility. You can look at like 5 houses in a neighborhood and be like, all right, how much solar are they generating? And they have gotten a lot of traction recently with different utilities who want to offer this to their customers because the visibility is just leaps and bounds better than what you can get by opening your electric bill, which is just looking at, your main load. So that's now a full-fledged SaaS application, residential utility customers. The data it collects is invaluable to a residential user, so they can see, hey, my pool pump's kicking on, my well pump's kicking on. Oddly, we send them an alert and tell them, hey, your well pump has this type of behavior, usually indicates a leak. You might want to go check that because you're losing water and you're using more energy.
Well, I would love that for my upstairs because I have 2 teenage boys and they love to turn lights on and leave everything
Yeah,
on. And I would love to have
yeah.
that level of granular,
Uh-huh.
analysis to be able to say, here you ding dongs. Here's how much
Yeah.
you're costing me every month when you don't turn your
You
lights and TVs and everything off upstairs.
you can definitely do that. We have mobile apps that go along with it for the residential side, and as we're pulling all this data in on a very frequent basis, we're aggregating it up, storing it to show you your daily, weekly, monthly usage. But we also have live data. So if you open the mobile app on iOS or Android, it'll actually show you what's going on in your home right then.
Wow.
And if you flip a switch, a second later, you'll see your
No kidding. I
energy
would think
drop.
the
Yeah.
potential of that is huge.
Yeah, they're really cool. That one's called Apolloware, and definitely worth checking out.
Okay.
They're out of the San Antonio area, and it's Silicon Valley level stuff.
Wow.
It is some of the most complex stuff we've worked on. It runs on AWS using all the most cutting edge stuff, and they've been a fantastic client for a couple of years now.
Wow. Well, as we talk about cutting edge stuff and some of the trends that we talk about in IT, and it's almost impossible now to have that conversation without talking about AI and LLM.
Hmm.
What do you see coming down? And again, right now, from at least talking to a lot of executives and leaders like yourself, it's still kind of the wild wild west. We're still in that experimental phase in terms of trying to find ways to utilize it in the business, just from a proof of concept type of thing. But what are
Hmm.
you hearing from your prospects and clients in terms of AI and how best to utilize it and start incorporating or experimenting with it in their own business processes?
Well, first thing, there's a ton of hype, so everyone's talking about it. There's a lot of sandboxes out there. I think I heard some stat. You probably want to fact check this, but that OpenAI has sold into 98% of the Fortune 500 already.
No kidding.
So they make ChatGPT and Dolly and the OpenAI API. I think a lot of that stuff is in the sandbox stage right now. There's concerns about data privacy. There's concerns about hallucinations, and I think probably the biggest thing I think is holding it up is response time.
Hmm.
And I see this a lot because I use ChatGPT almost every day,
Yeah, like so do
as
I.
do
Yep.
most of the people here, right? When you type in a query to Google, you get your results immediately, right? When you type in a complex query to ChatGPT, it types it out letter by letter, word by word. And I think that response time needs to increase and get a lot faster before we see more widespread adoption in production environments. It's tougher, I think, especially for people that aren't in tech every day, to deal with that. Even when you're talking to ChatGPT on the mobile app, it's not like talking to a person yet. If you read the text, it sort of is, but it's so slow with some of that stuff that at least today, that I don't think it's quite production ready. I don't think it's quite ready to handle all the phone calls into a business, but it's going to get there. And I think the custom hardware that people are building for AI is going to help them get there. I'm sure they're going to build some type of, I don't know if caching is the right term here, but some other novel ways to really increase response time for AI to make it
And maybe the quantum
better.
computing advances will kind of,
Maybe.
in
Yeah.
synchronicity with that, kind of help it.
Yeah.
It is fascinating to see. And again, even some of it is just we talk about just the utilization. The more that you can start using, just like Google, right? When Google search first came about way back when,
Hmm.
people, that wasn't the top of mind, right? And the other part of it that's important about that, I think, is that it's constantly learning. So the more that you're using it, the more that it's learning and understanding as well. And so it will just keep getting
Hmm.
better and better the more utilization that it goes through. But
Hmm.
it's going to be fascinating to see.
I definitely think getting the tool into your data when you're comfortable with it to review your production data is going to be huge. Training, like even a custom GPT now on a couple PDFs, so you can ask it. It's like having like a professor or teacher who deeply understands whatever you've plugged into it, that you can ask questions to rather than trying to read all the documents yourself. Um, on the data side, especially with a lot of our larger clients that have multiple applications, multiple data warehouses, there's a big effort to clean up and deduplicate and standardize that data so it can be used for training, because it's sort of like garbage in, garbage out. So
Mm-hmm.
if your data is not in a good state and you slap AI on it, it's not going to give you the best results. So we have quite a few projects today that are based on getting that data ready for AI training. So we have data pipelines going all over the place. Deduplication, like I said, data cleansing, define the source of truth. We've definitely seen a big growth in this space in the past couple of years and now have a distinct practice and team
Hmm.
around that. And we'll do reporting and data analytics and BI. But almost always we're in at a big client that's got apps that have been running for 20 years. There's got to be some work done on the data itself to make sure it's going to get them the insights they're looking for.
It's interesting, right? Because you talk about the garbage in, garbage out, and the data, and almost every organization has that concern. Like, yeah, we know it's not where it needs to be, the interesting part of the AI and LLM conversations is that it's forcing them to go clean up the data issue that they probably let linger for a
Yeah.
number of years because they know that they need that to be pristine before they can even start going down the path of trying to implement AI and LLMs in their processes.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I've seen a couple things as we've been going through moving applications from on-prem to the cloud and trying to modernize them. A few of these apps have been running for 20 years. There's logic all over the place that takes a while to dig out. Like there's stored procedures, sometimes hundreds of them per database. They're doing things with the data that you have to go in and reverse engineer. I was talking with a good friend of mine who's at another consulting company now, but we used to work together. And I think someone who can build an AI tool to look at all the stored procedures and decompose them and outline what they're doing to each of the records in the database that they touch, I think that's a big
Oh,
opportunity. And
huge.
it's probably something that's holding up a lot of migrations and data consolidation is just the brain power required to reverse engineer all this stuff right now is so high. And then as you get to actually moving it, you still find dependencies that you didn't caught during your manual review. So yeah, if anyone's listening to that and wants to build that, please contact me. I think that would be huge.
Well, I agree, and even from you mentioned that feeding it PDFs, and we've been doing that in terms of for clients and their data to be able to feed it into a just a small nothing extravagant, just a custom kind of chat GPT for that to put in the data to get it start learning, and then we'll start asking it questions in terms of from a marketing perspective. Hey, what are
Yeah.
some of the pain points? What are who do you think is the ICP? And it's amazing to see it. The more information, the more good information you feed it,
Hmm.
the better the responses are get. And it's again, I
Yeah.
just think it's a utilization thing. The more that people start utilizing it, using it hands on, the more powerful they'll see it can be. So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the marketing space. Uh, we have all of our service offerings on our website, but then we're partners with a bunch of different companies, like Databricks, Microsoft, AWS. And when you're going to work with companies like that, they want all your services tailored to them. So instead of having to rewrite it for AWS or Microsoft or Databricks, I'm able to plug in, hey, ChatGPT, here's what I do today. Here's some project examples. I need some marketing collateral specific to AWS or specific to Microsoft. And then I would get the draft back from them. I would work with ChatGPT to edit it a little bit, and then I do a couple rounds of manual edits too, because there will be issues in that. They'll call out the wrong service, or the wording won't be exactly right. Still think you need that manual review right now, but a huge time saver.
Huge
for us.
I mean, to get you from and everyone kind of agrees on this, the old, Pareto's rule of 80-20. If it gets you from 0 to 80%, that's significant, right? I mean, even in terms of, the marketing world and KPI and metrics and data and improvements, if we can improve 5 to 12%, in response rates, et cetera, pull through rates, that's significant. So even just to get from 0 to 80% and allow humans to take it from that to, the 80 to 100 or 80 to 90 is significant.
Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask you, what, you just talked about just now in terms of some of those, larger platforms, AWS and Microsoft and some of those, right? And again, they all want their own captive audience using, 100% of their tools and utilization and to, capture as much of the licensing as possible. And where you guys come in is obviously agnostic, probably, right? And ability to help them develop the best solution for them, independent of the different platforms or the different pieces of software that they may be using. Is that what you consider to be, kind of like your value proposition that you bring?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the sales pitch. We want to make the best product for our clients, no matter where it's hosted. AWS and Microsoft are always running different programs to incentivize customers to come on there. And in some cases, one is better for a client. But I'll say, just generally, most of our enterprise clients already have an enterprise agreement with Microsoft, so they go to Azure. So I have all of my consultants get certified in AWS and Azure, and same for our technical team. And as they get more deeper, more specialized, they might pick one lane to focus in. So if I have an Azure client, I know, here's my Azure expert. But we're building an app right now that's it's going to be sold into major retailers, and some of them don't want to use AWS. So while it's running on AWS today, we built it completely portable. So if they do sign up a customer that may see Amazon as a competitor, it can be deployed on Azure. And that definitely adds some complexity and cycle time to things, but it is the right answer for that client to make sure that if they get someone who wants to sign up tomorrow, we can just deploy it on Azure or on-prem for them, and then it will get up and running. The clouds talk to each other pretty well. The issue I see there is if you keep data within AWS or keep it within Azure, your data transfer costs are pretty low. But if you're sending data outside of Azure, outside of AWS, the data transfer costs go pretty high. So that's something for clients to consider, and we help them with the pricing and cost estimates and all that. Another big driver for us is I've had a couple clients come to us recently and say, my AWS or my Azure spend's out of control. I don't know what's running. I don't know how much it is. I just know it's too much. So we'll go in and we will take a detailed look at the architecture of the platform, the cloud infrastructure there, and really optimize it so they can reduce their operating expense. So one of our clients, they were spending 40 grand a month in cloud spend. We got that down to about 15. Wow. And actually improved the performance of the application by re-architecting how some of the data was coming in.
I would imagine, Patrick, there's a lot of organizations that are in that same position, right? As we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years, and the hyper growth of the different SaaS type of platforms and different plugins, and even internally, just a lot of probably IT band-aids, is for lack of better words, right? And so I would imagine I've heard that a lot, right? That there's a lot of, execs and leaders that are saying, we've got like a Frankenstein of an IT stack, and we need to figure out where we can reduce some of these costs, right? And make it more
Hmm.
streamlined so that it's truly, efficient for our business rather than, this monster that just keeps growing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it got a little crazy on a lot of people, especially since the pandemic too. Like there's a couple IT departments I feel like had almost unlimited budget, but now that's getting reined back in. So when we have a customer contact us who has an issue like that, usually the first two things they're focused on are cost optimization and security. Because you can have the best app in the world, but if it's costing you 100 grand a month to run, and you don't have enough customers to support that, it's going to die on the vine. And then that's not good for the customer. It's not good for their customers. It's not good for AWS. So we'll go in and try to get that to a number that they can live with.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears a little bit to growth. You guys have experienced a tremendous amount of growth. You've done a great job. As you mentioned, you get clients and you keep them and they keep coming back to year after year. I think you guys even got, last year, the 2023, you were on the Inc. 5000 list for fastest growing companies. And with
Mm-hmm.
growth comes challenges, right? Good challenges sometimes, but challenges nonetheless. And what are some of the, bottlenecks or challenges that you guys face in your organization with your growth initiatives?
Um, so the first one I think we've broadly solved, but I think it is a good story. When we were experiencing, close to 50% growth, that's a lot of hiring. So figuring out how to train those people and get them up to speed quickly was really important to me and the company. So setting clear goals for everyone for their 30, 60, 90-day plan, expecting them to get the Scrum Master certification on the consulting team, one of the cloud certs, whether it's AWS or Azure, really set the tone for everyone coming on during that time. These are the expectations. Here's what we need you to do. Another thing, as we grew so rapidly and we're hiring people in 2020 and into 2021, remote work was the topic du jour. We tried to hire some full remote people, and I think we got burned a couple times. Whether that was inflated resume, underperformance, sometimes working more than one
Right.
job, and we were second fiddle. So I think a lot of companies encountered this. So as we were dealing with that, we came up with it's not a policy. Don't tell my HR gal yet,
Well,
but
do we need to edit this out?
no, we can leave it in. So when we hire somebody, first 90 days, I want them in the office as much as possible, close to 5 days a week. I want them here with the team. Like we have an office in Denver, Kansas City, Texas, Chicago, and a couple remote people that we really trust. But first 90 days, we want them really in the office. We want them hitting their 90-day goals. We want them working with the team directly. You see like the whiteboard behind
Mm-hmm.
me, like this is still the best collaboration tool. I've not used any software that's as good as this when you're building something that doesn't exist yet. And then after that, we're flexible. And so what I had envisioned happening with that was after those 90 days, people would be like, all right, I'm going to work from home forever or like as much as I can. But it's not really has happened because we have a good office environment and people enjoy being together and collaborating. They just come in on their own, probably 3 or 4 days a week, just to do that. And then we give them the flexibility. We trust them, hey, you need to work from home for a week. You want to go ski in Canada for a month. Yeah, get your work done and we'll be fine with that. So I'm very happy with how that turned out. It definitely was better than what I expected.
Well, that's two things. Tells me you've got good culture, good leadership, because you have to have the ability to onboard the right people and have them want to come into the office, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
guys must be doing a really good job of that. From the ability to give employees the flexibility once that 90-day period, because let's face it, from a leadership standpoint, you can pretty much tell within 90 days if someone's going to work out or if they're not, right? It may not be a good fit
Yeah.
from either side, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then to have that flexibility on the backside is huge, and again that tells me that you'll probably have some where again the biggest hindrance to growth on the human capital side is finding good people, especially in the IT landscape. And so
Yeah.
having that probably gives you a good leg up.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think so. We have really good retention numbers for our team. There's some other things we do that have been around for a while. Um, we're salary plus bonus for everybody. A lot of consulting companies, it comes at the end of the year and it's discretionary and you have some control, but not a lot. Here, it's a fixed percentage of your salary and it's paid out quarterly based on objectives specific to that person they have full control over. So they meet with their career counselor, their direct manager every quarter at the beginning and set new goals for the quarter. And if they hit those, they get their bonus. So there's no ambiguity. If we had a big client go under, the company suffering, the bonuses still get paid out. So that's been, I think, really big for retention, and people seem to really like that. And it's also great for us because I get to set goals for my team on a yearly and quarterly basis and then delegate those down across the team. Some of these things I've had to do for AWS or Azure to get certain competencies or designations, they require a lot of people to get trained, a lot of deliverables. So being able to spread those out across the team and incentivize them to do that with their bonus has been great for us in terms of being able to get some of those things where when I look at the other companies that have gotten some of these competencies or designations, they're much bigger than us in terms of headcount. So we have a really efficient team. We're able to deliver a lot with the team we have.
That's great because I imagine you guys are going to keep growing, and in order to do so,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to need the talent to do so. So
Mm-hmm.
that's encouraging. Well, let me ask as we wrap up here. If a business owner, executive, or maybe even potential employees is watching that, what's a good way for them to get in touch with you or get in touch with 27 Global? Is it on LinkedIn? Is it your website? What are some good ways that they can either reach out or even follow you, Patrick?
Yeah, I'm big on LinkedIn, right? It's probably the first thing I open every day. Our website is pretty well built out right now with our services, industry served, partners we work with, a lot of case studies, and then we have a blog there, which we've been pushing a lot of more organic content out to. One of the things we started doing last year was delegating some blog articles and case studies to our team members on those quarterly objectives I was talking about. So a lot of the content out there, I think, is very valuable from a technical perspective in terms of how to do some very complex things like re-architecting IoT data ingestion or managing different AWS accounts, using B2B and B2C elements in SaaS platforms and how to do that right. And some more functional stuff, backlog management for SaaS applications. How do you customize those things? How do you make sure the agile process is working for you and your company? So I definitely check out our website for
And
most
so
of
your
our
folks
content.
are posting those to your website.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yep,
That's
on our
amazing.
blog.
Well, I have
Yeah.
some ideas for you on that after we get off here. So,
Okay,
well,
great.
listen, I really appreciate your time. I loved, talking with you. We've had a few conversations and I love learning about 27 Global, and hopefully we'll be able to get back on the Grow IT podcast again.
All right, sounds great, Terrence. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Patrick.
See ya.